pleasure that our next person that we got for the sort of tail end of these 24 hours of Share-a-thon is Dr. Elisabeth Schlosser. She is a meteorologist at the University of Innsbruck in Austria. She's actually German. And I met her when we shared a really interesting expedition of field work. The first time that there was an Antarctic winter expedition on the ship Polarstern in the Weddell Sea. It was the Winter Weddell Sea project. It was back in 1986, and I was on board to write a book about it. And Elisabeth was only the second youngest person on board, and we've been friends ever since. But the thing that made her even more unique in her ways in connections with Antarctica, Elisabeth is an Antarctic person, is that shortly, not so that many years after our Polarstern trip in 1986, she managed to convince the Alfred Wegener Institute, which is the German state Polar Institute in Bremerhaven, to actually send women to winter over in Antarctica. And that was a very difficult thing because they didn't want mixed teams. So they said to her, why don't you, if you want to go, you find women. And that's what she did. So they actually had a team of 9 women that worked that wintered over in Antarctica. And, it's a kind of a historical record in both ways. One, because there's never been another all-women team, at least at the German base Gerdau von Neumayer, which is on the ice shelf in the Weddell Sea, in the northern part of, northern if you think about Europe. And also because it was actually in the early 90s. And the difference between what is researched now and what it was then, I thought it was really fascinating to present the difficulties and the lack of communication. Like when I asked her, what was the communication for students you had, and she said none. There was no way. We did it afterwards, but certainly not at the time. So anyway, let's get this really interesting glimpse of a past of research with Elisabeth Schlosser, the first and only women overwintering in Antarctica.
I was just checking that I had actually shared the sound, sorry. Here we go then. Can you see? You can see the video, great.
Yes.
About the first overwintering in Antarctica of an only women team. And this was the first and only, and it never happened again. And I will tell you why. And meanwhile, this was 31 years ago, even a bit longer. And it still seems to be interesting because of the only women thing. And it just happened that the Germans built the station Neumayer, the wintering station in Antarctica in 1981. And for the first 9 years, there were only men working on this station. And of course, there were women who applied, including myself, but we always got a rejection. And then when I applied in 1988, I got a rejection too. And then they said, oh, well, sorry, we couldn't consider you this year, but we would be happy to have you among the applicants next year. And I thought, what's going on? Are they kidding? And then it turned out that 2 of my later to-be colleagues had talked to the head of the institute, the Alfred Wegener Institute, which is responsible for Neumayer Station. And he simply refused to send a mixed team for whatever reasons. They just feared problems. So he said, okay, if you find a team where all the positions are occupied by women, you can go. And that's what happened. So they found the team. It wasn't so easy, and there were some changes in the beginning, but in 1989, in December, we just went. And at that time, we didn't fly. Nowadays, they fly from Cape Town, but at that time, we went by ship with the German icebreaker, Polarstern. Very famous, still very modern ship. And it took us 10 days to go from South America to Neumayer. And on the way home, it was 10 days back to Cape Town in South Africa. So when we arrived at the base, we flew by helicopter from the ship to the base. And this is what you see when you approach the station by helicopter. And most of it is actually just some summer stuff. Here you see the helicopter landing place and then the balloon container. And this is only the summer camp. And the actual base, what you see of the base is just these tiny little dark spots here, because the station was 10 meters beneath the snow surface. And you can see the entrance here in the middle. And here are 4 entrance towers, which only had ladders, so you could climb out. And this is how it was built. It was built in a actually basically H-shaped steel tube construction with containers inside the steel tubes. And this was only another entrance where you could go down with big vehicles. And in these steel tubes, there were containers, and the containers made the rooms for the people, and also the mess, which is the living room and the kitchen and everything. And it was built at the surface in the beginning, and then it just gets blown in by the wind, because the wind blows all the snow there. And so after a little while, in our case, it was after 9 years, it was 10 meters below the snow surface. So the crew always consisted of 9 people. First of all, the doctor, then 2 meteorologists, 2 geophysicists, 1 cook, a radio operator, and 2 engineers. And you can already guess from these kind of occupations that it was not so easy to find women for these. I mean, doctor is easy, cook is easy, but to find a female radio operator who was also willing to stay in Antarctica for 15 months was not so easy. Also engineers. Usually the ship crew came from shipping companies, and they of course had ship engineers, but to find women for these jobs was not so easy, and that is simply the reason why it never happened again. It takes some effort to find this crew, and if you just take the applications and see what comes in, you always get more men than women. It just happens that way. So it was not because we were so bad and such a non-successful crew, it was just simply that most of these occupations are still basically male. And for us, it was actually not such a thing, oh yeah, we want to do something special, we go just as women there with an only women team. For us, it was the only chance to get there. And we wanted to go to Antarctica and winter there, and this was our only chance, so we did it in an only women team. And then we stayed there in one summer. Of course, in summer we were together with the men anyway, so it was mixed in summer. But then in early March, the ship disappeared and left us there. And we had to survive our own. There was no way to get out by plane or so. So it was, we were a little bit nervous, but we were also looking forward to the winter and to the whole thing. So I'm the one in the blue jacket here, or the others were in the red overalls. And you can't see the base because it's underneath the snow. Now you can see the base from the coast. So Neumayer at that time was basically an observatory. We didn't have any special scientific experiments. But I wouldn't say it was only an observatory, because it's very important to have long, high quality time series of meteorological data to be able to assess climate change and to understand the climate system. So we had a meteorological and a geophysical observatory, and additionally air chemistry measurements, and also we did some glaciological measurements, so investigations of the snow and the ice. And it was just a tiny little hut with all these instruments here. Nowadays it's twice as big and has much more instruments. But these tiny little thing you see here in the background, that is an instrument to measure CO2, and this is still the same after 30 years. I've seen it when I was there last time. So that's quite nice. And of course we had to go there every day and check everything and do all the necessary things. And we also had a meteorological mast where the temperature, humidity, and wind speed was measured. And there used to be a 50-meter mast, but that has just been destroyed in the year before. And we weren't too sad about it because otherwise we would have to climb up like this on the 50-meter mast. And I think for me the 10-meter mast was enough. And you see it's a bit tilted, and because there are very high wind speeds at Neumeier and there are very bad storms, and often something happens. And the main instrument you have was not the computer at the time, but the snow shovel, because you had to dig out everything after every snowstorm, and that was our main occupation. So this is what it looks inside. It was actually much more cozy than I had expected. This is our living room. There was some festivity going on. This is not the normal dinner table, but some party, but yeah, we had lots of books and videotapes for watching movies if you wanted to. And then also everybody had her own room, which was basically one container, and you had your own room with bed and wardrobe and the desk, and you could close the door, but it was so acoustically connected. You could hear when your neighbor turned the page of a book when she was reading. So you had a little bit of privacy, but not exactly as you would have wished for. So, and by the way, I saw these types of blankets still 30 years afterwards too. So some things survived. And yeah, this was my room. I had my pictures of the mountains at the wall, and it was nice and cozy. Then one question that we were often asked was, how did we get our water there? At that time, it was so that drinking water was brought with the ship. So we had all the drinking water in bottles, but the water for washing and showering and stuff like that had to be melted from the snow, because we were surrounded by so much water, but it was all in frozen form, of course. So here you can see what it was like in a snowstorm. Actually, you can't see much. This is the lid of a tube that connected the snow surface with a little reservoir that was heated down in the station, 10 meters lower. So you had to first fight the wind and get the lid off the thing, and then you had to shovel snow into this steel tube, and it should be enough that that was enough melted water for whatever we needed. And on a good day, it looked a bit better. This is a comparison of today and when we were there. This is, you see, it's a very small, actually just 1 meter diameter, so steel tube. And most of the case, it was either completely covered by snow, like you saw in the picture before, or there was often a very large crater, and the snow was so hard in winter that you needed an ice axe or at least a spade to just loosen the snow a little bit. It was not always like just easy shoveling. It was sometimes, but the majority of the cases there was some difficulties. And there was only one person that had snow shoveling duty, and the one who was on duty could use the washing machine, and also could take a shower as long as she wanted. But normally we were supposed to take very short showers because it was hard work to shovel all the snow, and you really start to appreciate the water that comes out of the tub at home. You just turn it on and then the water comes. But nowadays it's all done by a piston bully. There's a huge reservoir in the new station, and so now the washing machines there are running almost day and night, and you can shower as long as you want, and it's very different. But in the old days there was this thing, and that was it. So it was hard work. And of course we had some apart from the work, we had some free time in the evening or so, and the men used to watch 2 movies every night. And we said, no, that's boring, we don't want that. So we had all kind of activities. And for example, we had a refreshment of our first aid course, or we also had an aerobic class with music. There was one of the scientists had a professional trainer license, and she tortured us twice a week. And first we said, oh, it's so strenuous, but then we realized we really felt good afterwards, so we liked it. And we also had a dancing class. So sometimes on Sunday mornings when we had breakfast only at 10 o'clock, we would put up some Strauss waltz and do a little dancing before we had breakfast. So there were all kinds of activities. And then on the 21st of May, which happens to be my birthday, the sun disappeared. Since Neumeier is not at the South Pole, but at the coast, which is more than 2,000 kilometers north of the coast, Antarctica is very big. The polar night lasts only for 2 months. So it was supposed to come back in mid-July, which it didn't do. But during the polar night, you see it's still a little bit of light at noon. and it's not black the whole day. And also dusk and dawn last very long. So you get all these beautiful colors. And sometimes when the weather was nice in the polar night, it was much, much better than a snowstorm in summer, because visibility was good, you could see something, and it was beautiful. And you won't believe it, but there are almost every color. I mean, there is almost every color in Antarctica, even green. There's green in the sky and in the water. So we also worked, of course, the whole time, also when during the polar night. So this is an example when we were drilling a sea ice core. And also the meteorologist, I'm one of the meteorologists, I have to say. And we had the advantage that we had to go out every day. No matter what the weather was, we had to go out because we had to take care of the air chemistry lab, which was 1.5 kilometers away. And there was a hand line with bamboo poles, which connected the station with the air chemistry lab. So we could go in any weather, even if there was a hurricane, we could still go, and we did. Whereas other people, like the cook or the radio operator, when the weather was bad, they sometimes didn't go out for a whole week or so, because when it's 100 kilometers per hour wind speed and visibility 2 meters, you just don't go for a little walk. So we were lucky, we were forced to go out, and it was good. And you learn to play a little bit with the wind, which was nice in a way, because it came always from one side. Sometimes it was very gusty, so it could make you fall down, but you knew it came always from the east, so orientation was not so. And you found the right angle after a little while, and you just worked with this angle, and then you didn't fall. But then after 2 months, the sun didn't come back because the weather was so bad. So we had to wait for another 2 weeks until the sun finally came. But then, of course, it's a wonderful feeling when the sun is back. And you realize what you have missed before. I mean, there were shadows again, and shade and all the light. And when you saw the sun, you were just happy. It was like being freshly in love or so. It was really beautiful. So that was very nice when the light was back. And then I wanted to tell you something about this thing here. It's called white out. And many people mix up white out with a blizzard. Because in the blizzard, of course, everything is white too, and you don't see anything because there's snow in the air and it's like visibility of 2 meters or so. But whiteout is completely different. For whiteout, you don't need high wind speeds, you don't need snowfall. It just happens when you have a completely overcast sky and a snow-covered ground. And then the light is reflected between the cloud cover and the surface, and it's reflected back and forth all the time, so that you have a completely diffuse light, and you don't have shadows anymore, no contours, no contrast. When you see a little black thing in the distance, it could be a house in the distance, or it could be a matchbox just 2 meters away. And it's annoying for walking because you don't see the little obstacles in the snow. There are these like little sastrugi, little obstacles in the snow that the wind creates, and you just run into them or you fall and stumble over them. And it's very dangerous for flying, especially helicopter flying. So that's white out. And here on this picture, you see how it works. I mean, this man seems to be standing on the hand of my colleague, but in reality, he was standing at 30 meters behind her and a little bit higher than she was. So, but I think this picture demonstrates very well what whiteout is. So that's one thing in summer when it's light. And then I was asked to tell you a little bit about educational activities. But of course, you have to remember this was 1990, last century, last millennium even, and there was no internet. So we didn't have any video conferences or live interviews like they have nowadays. We could make phone calls in the beginning, but then our SATCOM broke down, our satellite telephone, and then we were back to shortwave radio. And if you have ever tried shortwave radio, it's not really fun because usually the connection is bad, and then it's just to hear the voice of the people at home, but you can't really communicate. But that also made us communicate more with our neighbor stations, with the British station Heli and the South African station Sane, and also with the Eastern German station. So we had a lot of communication with them on the radio, and that was quite interesting because they had the same conditions as we had. So we could talk to them and they would know what we were talking about, whereas the people at home, they had no clue. And of course, before the winter, there was a lot of press attention because it was the first only women team, but they were just asking the same questions all the time, like how could we survive without men, and how would it be with the men in summer? That was their main interest. Whereas, for example, I was in a children's TV show afterwards, and that was very nice because they asked intelligent questions like, where do you get your water from? If you melt the snow, isn't it dirty because of the vehicles? And do you celebrate Christmas in Antarctica? So that was very nice. I enjoyed that. But the normal press was just more annoying than, but definitely not educational. And then the fate of the base was basically clear because 10 meters underneath the snow surface, there was very high pressure of the ice because the ice is flowing. And it was clear that at some point it had to be given up. And this was the case 1 year after we were there. You can see all the deformation here. And this is mainly dangerous because of the cables that are running there. Deformation itself wouldn't be so bad, but it could destroy the cables and it would be very bad. So in 1992, there was Neumayer 2, the new base, which was also built underneath the snow surface. And then finally, in 2009, the new base Neumayer 3 was built at the surface of the snow surface. So this is not underneath the snow anymore. You can look out of the windows, and it is built on poles. You see here these blue poles. And this is, the idea was that the snow can blow underneath so that the station wouldn't be covered like the old bases. And also these poles are sort of the legs of the base, and they can, so the station can be lifted every year. And that is done every year. And only the amount of lifting is larger than they had expected. But anyway, so this is a very big difference compared to the old bases. You can see here the entrance to the basement where the vehicles are, but anything else is above the surface. And this is a very big difference. Also, there are more scientific experiments meanwhile, and it's more than an observatory now because they have all these projects in summer going on also about penguin research and all kinds of things. But I was lucky enough to go back there 27 years after my last time in Antarctica. And I found that the life at the station has really changed a lot, but one thing has not changed at all. And that's the incredible beauty of Antarctica, of the nature there. And so as often as I could, when the work was done in the evening, I would go to the sea ice or to the coast. And the first weeks we could go down on the sea ice, but then when it broke off, of course, it was too dangerous. And there were icebergs and seals and penguins. And when the sea ice was gone, there was water, and it was very beautiful when all these ice shelf edge was mirrored in the water and in the different light. And also, this is no Photoshop, this color is real. And I could have sat there for hours just watching the light change. And I feel privileged that I was able to work in such an environment. And I think the fascination of this cold and lonely, but yet incredibly beautiful continent will never leave me. So I hope I could give you a little impression so that the people who will never have a chance to get there know that this last piece of nature that is more or less untouched by humans needs to be protected in the future. With that, I would like to thank you for your interest. And if you want to learn a little bit more, I had a blog when I was in Antarctica last time. It was just a summer expedition, but you can look at my website and there's the blog about that expedition. Thank you.
So, Elisabeth, I'm very curious. How was the situation when you spent 15 months all the time with women, all the time?
As I said before, it wasn't exactly our choice, but I think no matter if it's women or men, the most important thing is that you have at least one friend down there. Otherwise, it can get very lonely. And I was very lucky because I had 3 friends. All the scientists were real friends I could trust and talk to, and I liked them very much, and they liked me. So that was very good. And of course, you don't get along with everybody the same. So, but if there's 1 or 2 people which are a bit difficult, as long as you have a friend or two, I think you're fine. And we were often asked what was the difference between an only women and an only men team. And I think generally it always depends on the individual people, of course, but there's one thing, I mean, in the women's team, we would never have left anybody completely on his own. Like if there was a problem, we would try to solve it and talk about it. And sometimes we talked a lot and sometimes we talked too much for my taste, but we would talk about it and we would solve it somehow. Whereas the men, when there was one winter and there was a guy who was he didn't communicate with the others anymore. He just went in the steel tube, you could go outside along the containers. So he would go outside along the containers to his little, whatever, workplace. He wouldn't eat with the others. He would just be alone for the whole time. And that would never have happened in our wintering. So if somebody had a problem, we would try to take care of her and in some way solve the problem. And I think that's one main difference. And of course, later, I mean, in summer, we had mixed teams, of course. I mean, not a team, the whole summer campaign consisted of men and women. And afterwards, we tried to convince the head of Alfred Wegener Institute to send mixed teams. And what we used to say, we said that some of the problems is constant. Because you create new problems, of course, because there are relationships and between people, and they can be difficult and they can be painful and whatever. But also, people behave better. The men don't curse when the women are around, and so it's a different way of living together. So you create some new problems, but you also eliminate some other problems, and the sum of the problems is constant. And I mean, I know several couples who met down there, who wintered together, and who are still together, who married and have lived happily ever after so far. But 10, 20 years or so. I mean, that's more than many other couples manage to stay together. So there can be very happy meetings. And I think, I mean, it didn't happen in my case, but I think it must be beautiful to just experience all this together with the person you love. So I envy all the people who had that. But I think women specific, as I said, more discussions, more talk, and more maybe thinking of the other person in general. But otherwise, for me, it was very strange to see children again afterwards, because it was not only no men, but it was also no pets, no children. So when we were in Cape Town, it was very strange to see little kids and dogs and stuff like that. So that was amazing too, somehow.
Well, also, from what I remember when we were together on Polashtan, when we actually arrived in Cape Town, it was strange to see people that we didn't know, because we had been spending 3 months, even with a big crew like Polashtan had. But I remember just saying hello to perfect strangers because we were used to that.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
Yeah, and then of course we had the radio contact to the other stations. So there was a British basis, mainly Heli, but sometimes also even Sydney Island or Faraday or so, and then the Sane guys and the Eastern German guys. And I mean, it was nice to talk to a man once in a while. Sure. It's just different. So, and it's normal, it's natural to have men and women. So I enjoyed this, and I think I made friends with one of the Heli guys and 2 of them afterwards. I mean, meanwhile, it's 2 of them. And it was nice to talk to them because, as I said, they knew what we were talking about. Mm-hmm. And we said, okay, there was a snowstorm, we have to get out of bed with a shovel in our hands. They knew what we were talking about, whereas at home, they had no clue. So that was nice too. But we never saw them. When we were in Antarctica, we never saw them.
But you met some of them afterwards?
Yeah. Back in England.
Yeah. Now, another question. Did you actually get tired of being in Antarctica for 15 months?
I never got tired of being in Antarctica. You did get tired physically, and maybe even mentally, because it was just 15 months without any vacation, without any weekend. We were working like 365 days per year. And plus 3 more months, because it was 15 months in total, and we never had a vacation. Like the British guys, they went on vacation during their wintering. So they would go off with skis or whatever, stay in a little hut somewhere and stay there with one other guy or two other guys for a week or so. And when it was a blizzard, their vacation was okay, staying in a little hut in a blizzard. But they got away from the base. We never got away from the base, and we never had a single day off. So we did get tired. But like a feeling that I want to go home, I don't want to be here, I never had that. I was a little bit homesick for the mountains, of course, because Neumann is just flat. It's just flat ice shelf. But we did have the icebergs, and the icebergs are just beautiful, beautiful too, especially in the light when the sun is low or during the polar night. It's hard to describe. It's just very, very beautiful. The shapes and the forms. And if you walk around an iceberg, we did that once in the summer last time when I was there, we just parked the ski-doos and we walked around the iceberg. And every 10 degrees, you wanted to take a new photo because the iceberg looked completely differently. And that was just amazing. I like the icebergs better than the penguins. Most people, oh, let's go to the penguins, let's go to the penguins. Yeah, they are nice and they are cute, but I prefer the icebergs. They were just
well, also you
could see them from the base. Sometimes they would fly when we had inversions and mirages, but you could usually see them when the weather was good. You can see them from the base.
But you also are an excellent photographer as well. So
it's one thing I regret. I would have liked to take better photos.
Well.
And nowadays, I envy the people nowadays, like in this mosaic expedition in the Arctic that I just had with Polarstern. I mean, they had all this digital photography. They had to take photos in any light. Whereas we had slides, and when it was dark, it was dark. And I also never tried to take photos of auroras. I just wanted to stand there and watch and enjoy it. And I was completely in awe when I saw them the first time. And then to play with the camera and think about exposure times, I didn't want that. I just wanted to. And at that time, you couldn't make good photos anyway. So the photos you took were not good. So
it's all part of the 30 years that have passed between.
It was a good year in terms of auroras. And solar activity was very high, except for the bad weather, of course. But when the weather was good, we saw very nice auroras.
Wonderful.
Even though we were 10 meters below the snow surface, but.
Are you still in touch with the women that were on your team?
Basically, one of them, who is still in polar research, and she will go back to Antarctica next year too. The others, they live in a different world now. I'm in touch with some of the men who came after us, but. Yeah, I don't know. I think there are not so many of us who are still living in the polar areas in their minds. Okay. Or who still long for Antarctica. There's only, me and my friend Stella, who will go back soon. And she had family and everything, so it was different for her for 20 years. But now the kids are grown up and she's back in the field. And so we have still the same attitude towards polar regions.
So are you planning or hoping to go back?
I would like to, but there's probably no chance. I mean, I will stop working as a scientist next year, and I plan to work as a freelancer. And so the ultimate goal would be to become so successful as a freelancer that I could go to Antarctica and write an article about it. But that's a very high goal. So I don't know if that's going to, if it's easy to, and not easy to achieve in any case, but if it's possible to achieve it at all, I don't know. But that would be nice.
Yes, well.
But on a scientific expedition, probably not.
Well, we wish you all the best and thank you very much for participating in our Share-a-thon. And we'll be in touch soon. Thank you, Elisabeth.
Yeah, I wondered if you wanted to just say a few words before we go into
the film.
To José's piece. Yeah.
Well, basically, José Xavier sent us also a film about Antarctica. So I thought it was a good place to put it here with Elisabeth, who absolutely loves Antarctica. And the film that José sent us is called the Latitude 60, and it was an educational project during an Antarctic fieldwork that was done from the James Clark Ross, the British icebreaker, and it goes back to 2007. But it's a very interesting and informative short film, so enjoy it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Let's see if we can play it now. And why aren't you playing? Oh, yes.
Okay.
Realmente está a ser espetacular esta experiência. Temos aqui alguns icebergs, estamos já a sul dos 60 graus sul e vamos ficar por aqui mais uns dias. Também se mesmo a chegar à zona, à extensão de gelo, ou seja, a zona a plataformas de gelo em que não é possível ir mais a sul, e a partir daí vamos até à convergência antártica, a estudar, utilizando vários aparelhos como redes de pesca, para apanhar e caracterizarmos várias espécies e o ecossistema marinho da maneira como é que funciona aqui na região antártica. Estamos agora rodeados mesmo por icebergs, o navio está mesmo ao pé da zona onde existe bastante gelo, porque a partir daí é que vamos a mostrar as áreas onde nós podemos conhecer mais sobre as águas marinhas ou como é que funciona o ecossistema marinho. Mas o que é fascinante aqui é realmente a quantidade de icebergs, pinguins e focas, ao nós estamos rodeados por eles, faz-nos pensar que realmente este planeta é muito bonito. É fantástico, nota-se bem que a paisagem é fabulosa. Temos aqui um iceberg de várias toneladas de peso. Incrível. Podem ver os pinguins, se conseguirem ver. Neste cruzeiro nós temos cerca de 30 cientistas, desde oceanógrafos, geólogos marinhos e vários outros cientistas que estão a estudar quer as estatísticas dos oceanos, quer também a própria estrutura da cadeia alimentar.
Very, very few people get the chance to come down here. And okay, there are some wealthy people that manage to get down here as tourists, but they don't get the access to the sites that we get to see. They don't get the hands-on that we get. They can go and visualise it, but they can't actually take something out of the sea and physically look at it and see it living and moving.
O ecossistema marinho, ou a biologia, a vida que existe aqui no Oceano Antártico, restringe-se, tem um papel muito importante em que o krill, o camarão do Antártico, realmente tem um papel fundamental na cadeia alimentar, em que os pinguins, as baleias e as focas dependem direta ou indiretamente deste recurso.
I'm Rachel Shreve. I work with the British Antarctic Survey and I'm working on all sort of levels of the food web right down the bottom. So the copepods, they are little tiny animals that live in the sea. They're kind of just about visible with the naked eye, about 3 or 4 millimetres.
Oh, fantastic.
And then I'm also working on krill, which I've got a little jar full here. And this is basically whale food. These form massive swarms in the ocean, and you get these massive whales, blue whales, you can feed on these krill. And I'm working up the fish level of the food web to see what they feed as well.
Aqui as temperaturas aqui deve estar agora já a 0, menos 5 graus negativos. É indescritível, é mesmo estar noutro planeta. É demais, é mesmo demais. Agora fomos para 60 graus sul, ou seja, um pouco mais a norte. Aqui o que nós podemos ver faz parte das Ilhas Orcadas do Sul. É a ilha de Sydney, onde há uma base britânica, de British Antarctic Survey. Maioritariamente fazem investigação da ecologia de pinguins, ou seja, saber onde é que os pinguins se alimentam, de que é que se alimentam, e estão a utilizar realmente tecnologias de ponta, como rastreio e satélite. Aqui neste cruzeiro nós estamos a tentar estudar diferentes tipos de habitats nas regiões polares, zonas mesmo no sul, à extensão do gelo, outras áreas que são zonas mais intermediárias em que a quantidade de gelo não é assim tão grande, ou seja, ainda é possível o navio passar à vontade, e depois entre outras zonas completamente mar aberto. E depois ainda as zonas da convergência antártica, que é quando as águas geladas do Oceano Antártico se encontram com as águas do Subantártico. E aí nós podemos encontrar também comunidades marinhas completamente diferentes. O nosso objetivo é, consoante estas diferentes comunidades ou habitats marinhos, perceber de que maneira é que, se houver alterações climáticas, o ambiente marinho se altera e de que maneira estas comunidades também podem ser afetadas. O nosso objetivo é compreender como é que várias espécies de peixe estão distribuídas em toda a coluna d'água, desde junto ao fundo até à superfície, e de que maneira é que podem estar disponíveis a vários predadores do topo da cadeia alimentar, como pinguins, focas e albatrozes. Os meus estudos têm aplicações extremamente úteis, quer ao nível de conservação dos organismos marinhos, ou seja, ajudar a preservar organismos como os pinguins, as focas e as baleias, mas também tem uma aplicação prática ao nível de gestão das pescas, ou seja, ao perceber quantos animais dependem de determinadas presas, de peixe, ou lulas, ou crustáceos, de que maneira que podemos ajudar os pescadores a capturar a quantidade suficiente para o homem, mas também preservando o ambiente.
Latitude Share-a-thon has been cracked up by this, by Latitude.
Hoje devemos estar muito perto da Geórgia do Sul, por volta de 55 graus sul. Este é o nascer do sol na Antártida. Algo que também é muito interessante é a vida que se vive no navio oceanográfico. Nós temos uma equipa a trabalhar para nós, desde um capitão a vários engenheiros e também cozinheiros, que realmente têm um papel muito importante porque proporciona aos cientistas de estarem preocupados com outras coisas além da ciência.
I'm Dirk Briggs and I work for the British Antarctic Survey.
And what are you doing on board?
I'm one of two bird observers and our job is to try and count all the birds that we see. And the idea behind it is so that we can add our piece of jigsaw to all the other science that's going on.
Do you count seals as well in Wales?
Yeah, seals, cetaceans, pretty much anything we see.
And how is to do polar science or coming here? How do you feel as a scientist, a British scientist?
Oh, well, it's great. I mean, to have the opportunity, I mean, it's what it's all about. You know? I would go quietly mad if I didn't have the opportunity to do that. So it's fantastic. Yeah, this is why I'm here.
Também é fascinante em relação aos animais que vivem na Antártida, que são animais extremamente bem adaptados. No caso dos pinguins, têm uma camada de gordura e de penas que os protege com o frio. Por exemplo, os peixes têm uma enzima que faz com que as suas células não congelem, ou seja, conseguem sobreviver a temperaturas da água que o ser humano não conseguia resistir. A nadar nestas águas sobreviveria apenas 5 minutos. Eu não sei o tamanho das vagas, mas realmente está um pouquinho, não é?